Well, hello and welcome to the Game Line. We're currently going out live on Facebook, YouTube, and on Periscope. We're going out a little bit later on in podcast form. I'm your host, Ben James, and I'm joined this evening by Matt Southcombe and Simon Thomas. Wales are one game away from a Grand Slam. Who could possibly have conceived that a mere few months ago? They beat in Italy today, 48-7. Comprehensive, to be honest, in Roma. Bonus points secured long before the halftime whistle. Gents, it's a tough one to analyse in many ways, isn't it?
It's a funny one because if the viewers are watching this, CRI is wandering elsewhere. It's probably because the England-France game is on the background. And I think in the same way as in which we've got one eye on that, inevitably I think Wales would have had one eye on that France game coming up next week, because I think realistically everyone knew. I mean, Italy hadn't won a Six Nations game 30 games in a row. They lost the last 30. I mean, just, in dire situation. And I think the general view was that if Wales played anything like they could, they should win comfortably, and they did. It was quite a professional job, I thought, really. I mean, especially if you look at the fact, they scored 4 tries during the 20-minute period where Italy were a man down due to having a player in the sin bin. The skipper Lukovic and the prop also went off, and very clinical at that period. I think Wales probably become quite accustomed to knowing what to do against 14 men during this championship, haven't they? And they certainly showed quite a ruthless streak there, capitalising very effectively on the game. And really that 20-minute period won the game, along with the line-out mauling, which I'll come on to later. But yeah, job done. And now we wait to see whether we'll be playing a French team that's won or a French team that's lost. And half an hour to go.
Exactly. Obviously, as you say, eyes are sort of naturally drifting towards the television. But the good thing from Wayne Pivac's point of view is this is in our hands, isn't it, man? This is, we don't need to worry about the French too much. It's just a Grand Slam.
Yeah, I mean, as Simon touched on, it was a thoroughly professional job today. Just the little, you could see the experience coming through as well from players who have been there and done it before. When BG went off for his yellow card and Italy took off Monty Ioane on the wing to make way for the replacement hooker. Suddenly everyone knew where the space was, and there was a missed pass from Dan Biggar, and Josh Adams was in the corner, and suddenly you're opening up a lead straight away. It was textbook way to beat Italy, take them out of the game in the first 20 minutes, and they never really come back from that. If you look, historically. So, it was a great performance all round, really, from Wales. I know things sort of fell off a little bit in the sort of final quarter when all the changes had been made, and I think perhaps a few players trying to prove too much of a point and try a little bit too hard. Concentration went at times. A few drop passes and it got a bit sloppy. But I think you let them off. The game was killed in the first half, and as you said, Ben, it is all in Wales's hands, and I guess we'll come on to talk about the game next week in a little while. But if you had said to me that Wales would be 4 from 4 at this stage at the end of the autumn, I would never have believed you. We've talked. There's been a lot of talk in the press conferences as well. Looking back on where they were back in the autumn, did the players really believe they could get to this point? Pivac will tell you that suffering was required, and you see the likes of Callum Sheedy and those players, Kieran Hardy as well. Before his injury, Lewis Rees-Zammit obviously benefited from it as well. We're kind of seeing the benefits of that series now. So, to get to this point, there's been a great achievement. They just need to go and finish the job, really.
It's interesting, Matt. You talked about BG being off, and the fact that Ioane was taken off amid the reshuffle. It was cute from Wales, wasn't it? Because almost the obvious thing in a way was to go to Ioane's wing, but they actually went to the other wing when it was a one-on-one. But I think what they did show was an awareness. When you're against a team that's reduced, especially when the wings come off, you look to stretch. You look to stretch them even more than they already are down a man. And you look to get the ball in the hands of your wings quickly. And then they did that with the Josh Adams try. Lovely long pass from Biggar right into his path. One-on-one with Bellini, he wasn't going to be stopped there. And if you look then at the build-up to the second try when BG was in the bin, again, it was a turnover when Italy were actually on the attack. Ball quickly out to Rees-Zammit, long kick downfield, creates an attacking opportunity. Ball goes into midfield again. It's a long pass from Liam Williams to Josh Adams. Stretch the team that's already depleted. Adams beats a couple of men, a couple of forward carries, simple passing out wide then to a team that's been stretched to breaking point. 5 pairs of hands. Lewis Rees-Zammit out to Faletau. First try for Wales in 5 years. Job done. It was clinical. It was good. It was impressive, and they did the same then again in the second half when the prop got sent off for leading with a forearm. I think into Halahola, wasn't it? Again, up the tempo because they'd gone a little bit off the boil at that point, but upped it again. Scored 2 more tries while the man was in the bin. Brilliant play from Navidi for the first one. I thought, the way he got the ball across the body with Stephen Varney right in his face, but Sheedy over. And then it was the gas man, wasn't it? The gas man came knocking, picked off Canner's pass on his own 22, spun away, and it was bye-bye, wasn't it? You weren't catching Lewis Rees-Zammit from there. And that was the game done and dusted. And, yeah, just very impressive, really.
I think we all went in our predictions for victories very similar to the end scoreline. So that wasn't a surprise in itself, but we probably didn't expect it to come in the manner that it did in the Wales. To sort of paraphrase Wayne Pivac, they brought the razzle dazzle early, which was something that he didn't expect them to do, and that we didn't expect it. We thought it'd probably be, you get on top of Italy for the first half, and then the points will come later in the match. And it was the complete opposite. Wales were at one point, had as many points on the scoreboard as there were minutes on the clock.
Yeah, look, Italy were terrible, and I don't think we nobody really expected them to be that passive that early in the match. There's a lot of talk about Italy, there always is, but we're pushing 7 years now since they've won a Six Nations game. You always expect them to front up in the first 20 minutes, but really Wales, it was tough to watch at times. Wales didn't really have to get out of second gear in that first 20 minutes, and they were running in tries almost at will, and it looked easy. That Faletau try, as the ball was going across the line, it didn't exactly fizz across the line. It took its time to get to Faletau, but from the moment that it started going across the field, it was a weird sense of inevitability about the try. Italy were really poor, and it kind of made it easy for Wales in a way. It almost felt like a training session at times. There was no way really that the Italians got on top, really throughout the match. So, like you said, you didn't expect it to come as easily as it did, to be honest. And I don't think Wales expected that. But, it was the perfect afternoon for Wayne Pivac. You get the bonus point in the bag, get it in the bag early, and then it allows you to bring off, your Alan Wynns, your George Norths, your Faletaus, get them off, wrap them in cotton wool, and give them a half hour on the bench rather than out in the middle. So, no, it couldn't have gone much better from his point of view, but really, I think the conversation should be in that regard around just how poor Italy were.
That's the other thing, isn't it? That whole thing about it feeling like a training ground exercise is, it's made it you feel like that even more because of the absence of a crowd. And it is just like watching them going through the training regime. And, even with a sort of a kind of prosaic try like that, where there's a kind of inevitability to it, you'd still get excited with the crowd there, wouldn't you? Because the crowd could see it coming. With this one, it was just like running it through, wasn't it? It was literally like the kind of thing you'd see them doing the basics, put the ball down back to halfway, let's go again, next training run. And I suppose that's where Italy are at the moment. But you've got to still beat them, and I think Wales made them look poorer than anybody has this championship, to be honest. They just did a real number on them. And the big thing for me as well, it's the transformation in that Welsh line now. It's been a gradual thing, hasn't it? It was so poor in the autumn. Real problems again against Ireland in the first game. Sorted it against Scotland, and it's just grown and grown and grown. And it's gone now from being an Achilles heel to an absolutely key part of their attacking armoury, because they haven't just sorted it, they've now turned it into a major weapon, in particular with the way they attach to it this driving maul. The driving lineout that Wales have now is a lethal weapon. They are eating up ground with it, and it's been something that's happened more and more as the campaign has progressed. They just seem to have it really well oiled. It gets going forward. It's very hard to stop. Even when they're momentarily stopped, they get it going again. The opposition don't seem to have any answer to it. And the succession of tries now during this championship have stemmed from that area, whether it be a bit of a rumble forward to get things going initially before the ball goes wide, as with the Faletau try, came from Alan Wynne-Jones' take, rumble, carry on, try comes from eventually. Or now they've got the ability to take the direct route and go straight to the whitewash, which is what they did twice today with line-out tries that ended up with Ken Owens going over. First of all, he's in the van. Then he does very well for the second after it splits a little bit, finds himself isolated, breaks away, gets up, stretches over. He waits 5 years for a try and 2 come along in 8 minutes for the Sheriff. So, happy days. But that line out now, 13 out of 13 again, and just a hugely impressive maul. It's a major part of their game.
Yeah, you can see the confidence starting to come through in the line out. I think it was sort of midway through the second half. It might have been after Ken's second try. They had another attacking line out where they goes the tail and then they pop it back inside from the back of the maul to Josh Adams, just running little moves like that, little variants and stuff like that.
Yeah, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, Ken had come onto the tail, and then he gave an inside ball to Josh Adams. Just stuff like that, just looks like they're starting to grow in confidence. And maybe last year was a case of putting the cart before the horse, so to speak. They wanted all these little nuances, but they couldn't secure possession. And now they're doing the basics, and as such that they're starting to thrive from it. Let's have a little look in the comments. One here from Gary Stevens says Simon is clearly not engaged in this chat. I think
I'm talking.
I think you noticed, Gary, that there might be a game on in the background. Let's get on to individual performances. Who stood out today?
Well, for me, I think Dan Biggar deserves a mention. Obviously a man who's under a lot of fire regularly. I think if you look at the way he's playing at the moment, you see that wide pass for Josh Adams' first try. That's something a lot of people accuse him of not being able to do. There was an offload as well that almost led to a try in the first half back inside to Corey Hill, I think. So you just see that sort of endeavour from him as well. I just think that he, the high ball that he gathered as well from the Gareth Davis box kick in the first half. I just think you're seeing a lot of the best parts of his game at the moment. I don't think he's been as bad as some people have made out, but I think I think he was certainly a contender for one of the better performers today. And obviously Josh Navidi getting man of the match would be one of the others as well. But it's a bit like, because it was such a commanding performance in so many ways. It's difficult to single out individuals that they were just so much better than Italy in pretty much every part of the game. But I would probably just give a word for Biggar myself, just because I thought he managed that first half very well and put Wales in a really good position.
Yeah, obviously Navidi was the man of the match, and I've mentioned that, lovely bit of skill where he passed across his body for Sheedy's try, put a huge amount of tackles in, carried, deserved a prize for him. Others for me, Ken Owens, I've mentioned him already for the tries, but Ken needs to take a real credit because he's played a big part in transforming that lineup and making it such a strength. And he's just such a galvanizing. You really have to watch him singing the blooming anthem at the start, don't you? Bellowing it out, he was alongside Alan Wynne-Jones. It just kind of sets a stall out, doesn't it? It's such a reassuring presence to see those two together, and Ken's accuracy in the line out and his contribution around the field and his inside passing. I'll tell you the other one, perhaps another one who maybe is a bit of an unsung hero. I thought Corey Hill as well. Corey's become a really important member of that squad. And more so than in any kind of period during his time, he's a real line-out target now, up and down the line-out, winning really good ball, carrying good hands. So I think, that's an interesting one there, isn't it? With Adam Beard playing so well as well, that's a big, big call. I don't know, I suppose you look at what you want for the France game, but again, it's just great to have that kind of strength and depth. We have someone like Jake Ball, coming off the bench as well. I know he's leaving at the end of the season. Yeah, but I thought Corey Hill did well. But yeah, it was just generally a very good performance. And Josh Adams as well. Just one little mention for him. It's a tough campaign in many ways, as we all know. Didn't make a bit of a mess of the try, which he should have finished this, the second opportunity. But I thought generally he looked very threatening today.
Yeah, it was a strange one for Josh Adams today, wasn't it? Obviously, he took the try well to begin with. I think Shane Williams said on commentary that he'd fallen out with the ball at one point. It just seemed to be bobbling away from him a couple of times. Obviously, there was that knock on down the left when there was some nice work. I think he missed the kick then seconds later. And then obviously the try itself is one that he'll probably look back and think, how did I not finish that? It was a
weird one. It was like
a weird one.
It was like he had the ball over the line for quite a long period, didn't he? And he almost like almost pressing it against his own leg, it seemed at one point. I mean, listen, Josh Adams will find himself in that situation 50 times and he'd score 46, 47, 48 times. He'd score, wouldn't he? It happens. But I thought, I mean, in particular, if you look back to the build-up to Faletau's try, the way he cut that line in between two defenders, he had loads of work to do, took play right up to the line. That's what he can do. And I think generally he's getting more involved. And I think that's a really big plus for Wales to get him back involved, because he is a really potent threat when he gets the ball.
It was a real shame that the try wasn't allowed, because the build-up was just brilliant. I think Sheedy threw a sort of miss pass over the top of an Italian defender. There was offload to Liam Williams to get the ball wide. If the scoreline wasn't so close, could you make the argument? Would the TMO have intervened there? Was it clear and obvious to overrule the try? That's the argument I saw some people putting forward.
I mean, the other try that was ruled out, Lewis Rhys-Sammis try in the when it was a forward pass, I think from Bigger was given, wasn't it? That was a lovely move as well. Hit the line from George North. I mean, that's the other thing I was going to mention very briefly was his offloading. It was something you didn't see a huge amount during the Warren Gatland era. Tended there to be a case of making sure of retaining possession, going through the phases to wear teams down, and just even Jones and Wayne Pivac. There's a different emphasis. There's more of a license for players to play that kind of high risk, high reward strategy, which with defenses being so organised is such an effective way of getting through and putting people into space. And for me, you saw it exemplified by George North's try early in the second half. And the fact that it was Jonathan Davis who did the offload showed that the senior players are buying into this Welsh way, drawing the man, pops it away. You put North into space like that with his pace and power, he's going to score. So it's just another example for me of how Wales are becoming a very dangerous side with ball in hand. That is 17 tries now in 4 Six Nations matches. That's some return.
Yeah, just quickly on that, Ben. Sorry as well. I think that's evidence of the evolution of the side as well. Because if you cast your mind back to the Six Nations last year, they always struggled to get that balance right. They were throwing offloads, but they weren't always offloads in the right part of the field. They were kind of throwing it when it wasn't on. It was almost like barbarians rugby at times. But it kind of feels like they've got that balance right now, and they're starting to find that sweet spot. I think it was Eddie Jones mentioned that you got to look for a sweet spot between the coach's philosophy and the way that the team is able to play. And I think they're starting to find that they're playing a bit of what Pivac wants to do, but they're not going too far away from what they're actually good at as individuals as well. So now you're starting to see that balance. And, the offloads, like you said, that a lot of them stuck today. You saw the North one for the Rhys-Sammis try that was disallowed, then the Davis one for the North try. And as I touched on earlier, that bit of interplay for the one that nearly sent Corey Hill over in the first half. When you see Wales playing that way, it's quite encouraging, getting through the tackle, getting your arms free. But it just feels to me like this side is starting to find the right balance between, doing too much and doing just about the right amount.
I've just seen Ellis Genge's hair. I'm sorry, I have to break in at that point. What has he done? Honestly, it's like Scott Quinnell, 1999, the bleach blonde look. Fair play to him, as if he wasn't noticed enough with some of his activities on the pitch. Yeah, extraordinary. But
I think they just won a very big scrum penalty. So,
oh dear. I think Matt made a really good point there about the balance. It's finding that area, that compromise, not compromise so much, but that nice mix of the way you want to do things, the way things have been done, the experience players bring, and just meld it into a very effective unit. He said in his pre-match interview I saw with ITV that they were aiming for this perfect display, and it's still not there, because they bombed a couple of chances they really should have taken, and they let a try in, which we'd be disappointed with. But you just feel that it's moving up, isn't it? It's on an upward curve, and the confidence is growing, it's blossoming. They're willing to try things, and what's important is you've seen Wales teams do that in the past, but without much of a platform. They've now got a line-out that works and is really effective. Their scrum is solid. And they're doing a number on teams physically. And when you've got that, and you've got attacking ambition, and you've got a strike back three like Wales have got, and an outside centre like Wales have got who can score tries given any space, that's a pretty decent unit, isn't it?
Definitely. You mentioned they'll be frustrated conceding a try today. A question here from Richard Thomas. What's your view on Gethin Jenkins? Things seem to have turned the corner since he came on board. Undoubtedly so. I think he's sort of gone back to basics, hasn't he? Where maybe Byron Hayward had overcomplicated things in his philosophy of defence. Gethin's very much gone back to what they know.
Yeah, I guess that's probably fair. And I mean, I asked Wayne Pivac if Gethin would be disappointed with conceding that try today, and Pivac said that he was fuming when Wales were 27-0 up at half-time because they weren't bringing the right amount of line speed or winning the collisions in the way that he would have liked. So that gives you an insight into the mind of Gethin Jenkins, I think. And you got to remember how much rugby that he played under Sean Edwards. And was often heralded as a really good defensive player that sort of belied his position as a loose-head prop in many ways. Over the ball and things like that. So he was very much mentored and taught by Sean Edwards for the bulk of his career. And if you spend that much time under a coach like Sean Edwards, it rubs off, doesn't it? And I think that probably influences his philosophies now. And like you said, they probably have gone back to the way that things, a lot of the players will be comfortable with in those systems. There's still a few little things that are not quite right, and at times they've been cut to pieces in the tournament. But it really is, obviously it hasn't been major damage because they're 4 from 4. But I watched particularly the first 20 minutes today. Italy there was nothing. They offered absolutely nothing that troubled Wales, and Wales looked so comfortable without the ball that it was almost like an unfair contest. But yeah, I think you've got to praise Gethin Jenkins. I think the Ireland game was well over 200 tackles and things like that. Those stats are incredible, and you have to compliment the defence coach for that.
Yeah, I think so. 240 tackles, I think, wasn't it? And it was a well taken try by Ione today, wasn't it? I mean, sometimes that's going to happen against you, and against France, they're certainly going to be tested. So we'll find out a bit more again about the Welsh defence in Paris, I guess.
Obviously, moving on to France, we mentioned one selection battle that could be a tough one for Pivac to decide. That's Corey Hill or Adam Beard. In terms of the rest of the squad, it's largely settled. One position that might be interesting is scrum half. I don't feel like Gareth Davis nailed the jersey down today. And if Thomas Williams comes back into contention in the next week, could that maybe be a decision for him to make?
That's the uncertain bit, isn't it? Because we kind of thought Thomas might come into the equation for this game because he said he was back in training after his hamstring, but they can be tricky things to overcome. I think Pivac's phrase was that he wasn't quite ready. Does that mean that he'll be ready in a week's time? I mean, I think if he is, he comes into the 23. I suspect they'd probably still start with Gareth because Thomas wouldn't have played since the opening game against Ireland, which was our first week in February. So you're talking 6 weeks. So my guess would probably be stick with the winning team with Gareth Davis at 9. I think the one change, despite what I said about Corey Hill, and he was excellent, I think possibly the one change would see Beard come in as much as anything because he's such an effective operator in line-out maul defence in the front. We know what the French can do in that area, and he's very effective at calling the line. So probably the same again, but just with that one change.
Maybe the other sort of, not question mark, but the other one that needed to sort of prove himself today in terms of fitness, Jonathan Davis. How do you think he went in 12?
Yeah, good enough. There was a few mistakes in the second half, but you saw the offload for North's try. That was nice, and it shows a bit of promise to see those two guys linking together in that sort of way. So I think you can be satisfied with his performance. I think it's another step in the right direction. He's still clearly on his way back. I don't think he's quite the finished article in terms of getting back to where he was at his best, but he's definitely moving in the right direction. And I think you can be satisfied with the way he's performing. I think he keeps the shirt. I don't think there was enough in there to suggest that he doesn't start in Paris. He's got so much experience as well. That's going to count for so much in the final weekend. I don't think you start Willis Halaholo now in Paris. Not for me anyway. I thought that Johnny Williams was actually quite unlucky to be totally thrown out of the mix in this competition. Doesn't seem to be getting a look in now, which I thought was perhaps a tad harsh. But I think Jonathan Davis is, while he's clearly not the Jonathan Davis of 2017. I think he's definitely moving in the right direction, and it has been pleasing to see the way that he's formed a bit of a partnership now with George North, particularly today.
He's looked comfortable at 12, I think, really. He's just a very experienced player, a lot of rugby know-how, isn't he? And I think the partnership is gelling. I mean, that try for North was, real evidence that it is coming together quite nicely.
And what was interesting is I think at the start of the tournament, you saw, obviously, when Lee Halfpenny was playing fullback, he was taking on that sort of role as the second playmaker in the back line, standing as first receiver, second receiver a lot. Obviously, Liam Williams is now fullback. And I thought today we saw Jonathan Davis taking that role a lot more, which is a fair bit different to what we've sort of seen from him with Wales before. Maybe that's why he's sort of risen the pecking order sort of above Johnny Williams, is Pivac sort of looked to maybe where his fullback is going to be in terms of the pecking order and adjusted his centre selection accordingly.
Yeah, the other thing that Jonathan does offer, he's a real distraction. It's almost like Jamie Roberts thing, because Jamie was an even bigger man, but Jonathan's a big boy, and when he comes on a decoy run, he's going to distract you. I think that was noticeable a couple of times today. He will catch the eye, and the ball can then go behind him, and the strike runners behind can do their damage. So, and obviously he does bring real solidity in the sort of head-to-head physical challenges. And when you think that you can have Vakatawa coming down some channels next week, I think that Jonathan's physicality and his strength and organisation there will be valuable.
If you have noticed the eyes flit into the television screen more than usual, I think England have possibly scored a try here, but I think they're going to the TMO, so we'll keep you updated on that one as and when. So we've talked a lot about Italy. Now it's a quick turnaround, and it's a Grand Slam week, and it's going to feel like a Grand Slam week, probably like no other, because the tournament as a whole, with COVID and the lack of fans, has been slightly low-key in its build-up, and it'll be interesting to see maybe how that progresses this week.
Yeah, very interesting week, isn't it? And it's kind of it's weird, the whole momentum, isn't it? Because you can't kind of quite tell what's going on in people's houses right now, and how much are people jumping up and down and going crazy about it all, and sort of. You could certainly tell in Cardiff after a match day, if Wales were one game away from the Grand Slam, it'd be like the fall of Saigon, But whereas now it's hard to say. But I think we really have to look at. I suppose it's a little bit of a barometer, the amount of people who are reading our stuff about it. They seem quite engaged, don't they? And there's a lot of enthusiasm and interest. And I think it's like a lot of Wales' successes and Grand Slams that I've experienced in the past. They're the best ones is when they're a bit of a surprise, This has been a very, very pleasant surprise, and it's just going on and on and on now into the last game, and it's going to be a great week.
I think what you got to look at in it as well is you got to look at the experience in this side now. Alan Wynne-Jones has won 3 Grand Slams and another Six Nations title already, so he knows what this week is all about. I mean, the one question mark you kind of had over Wales in recent weeks is how much can the youngsters keep their focus? How are they going to be able to keep their feet on the ground? Are they going to get carried away with the situation? How much are the older players in the squad going to be able to keep them under wraps and focused on the task at hand? And they always, so far they seem to be doing that. And I think you've just, like I said, you've got to look at the spine of this side now. I think that was the most experienced team Wales have ever named today in terms of caps, like well over 900 caps. Throughout the side, there is so much experience now, and players that have done this a number of times. Just speaking to George North and Alan Wynne after the match just now, you just hear them talking, and you just get a sense that they're not going to be overawed by the challenge that lies ahead. So, I'm not saying that this is a foregone conclusion by any stretch of the imagination, because France are probably, you know, the toughest challenge Wales will face in this competition. So, you know, this is going to be no easy task. But if Wales don't get the job done next week, I don't think it will be because they lost their focus. I think it will be because France are a very good side. So, you know, all the signs we've seen so far are that this team has got the right mindset. They're in a good frame of mind. They're obviously now playing with confidence as well. So I think you look at the experience in that camp now, and it just gives you a little bit of a sort of safety blanket kind of feel to it, that they're not going to let this week get the better of them.
I mean, I think the nature of the week may just have changed, really, about just what's happened at Twickenham. And I know, ironic, isn't it? The man who took a lot of flack after the Wales-England game, Maro Itoje, is the man who scored the try to put England ahead 23-20. He's just celebrating there like he's won the World Cup. After another penalty goes England's way. So 2 minutes left, England leading. I mean, so as it stands, that does change the nature of the table. I mean, just looking at it there, I mean, France would obviously get a losing bonus point, which would take them to 10. They'd still have 2 games to play, and they would be 9 points behind Wales. So, you know, you can start doing the maths, can't you, really? You know, obviously the ideal thing would be for Wales to win next week and absolutely nail it. So making the kind of France's last game of the week after against Scotland kind of, you know, a bit of irrelevance in terms of the table. But, you know, losing bonus point, you start to come into the equation of all that. But it's not, I think you just settle for it, didn't you? Wales going into their last game with a 9-point lead in the championship table. Probably settle for that beforehand, Mr. Pivac.
Yeah, exactly. But I think one point on that is I don't think there'll be a lot of talk about that. Will there? You know, we all know that they'll be in camp this week, wanting to finish with a Grand Slam. I don't think anyone's going to be discussing the prospect of losing bonus points being enough or any of that sort of chat. I think they'll shoot that down pretty swiftly.
I mean, they've got to play Scotland as well. They're a tidy team, France, you know. So, I mean, it's looking good. I mean, I suppose, I've been watching this game closely in the first half and flicking back and forth as we've been talking. And it's interesting, you know, and it is important, I think, in terms of what Wales are going to face. It's been a real mix. I mean, there's been some absolutely extraordinary rugby from France in this game. Their second try, straight off the training ground, absolutely executed to perfection. That just showed their absolute threat. It was magnifique, you know, it really was. Yet England have also caused them problems. So it'll be fascinating. I'll just sit down and look through the tape, and there'll be things to look at that you have to worry about, things to look at. You think, well, might be an opportunity there, you know. And England has softened them up, going down the middle and then going wide at times, and scored a try there through Itoje with, like, you know, muscling their way over. So even look, DuPont even had a kick charge down in this game. The bloke's human, you know. So there's always hope, isn't there? And I was looking at the face of the French coach now. He looks like he's had a month of Sundays that he didn't like. There we are.
Well, it's going to be one heck of a week, isn't it? Regardless of the France game. After that, it is full time. Yeah, England 23, France 20. So, you know, the job doesn't change for Wales, does it? There's 1 week left. The tournament of Wales. It's a Grand Slam on the line for them. They know what their job is next week. It's a massive, massive week. Bubbers, I believe, are finally back open next week.
What are you saying? What are you saying?
You want to get yourself booked in, son? Maybe a nice Grand Slam haircut. Maybe more important than a Wales Grand Slam decider. But while you won't be able to follow me getting my haircut on Wales Online, you will be able to follow all the action ahead of next week's Grand Slam decider on Wales Online.